Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee for West Yorkshire Combined Authority for the current year. What we'll do is we'll just briefly go around the room and everybody can introduce themselves, because some of us have met offline, others know each other intimately because of their party associations, others it might be new to people. I'm Councillor Barry Anderson. I come from Leeds.
I'm Hannah Scales, I'm Scrutiny Support Officer.
I'm Caleb Broom, Statutory Scrutiny Officer.
Moses Crook, I'm Councillor from Kirklees.
Jo Lawson, Kirklees Councillor. Suli Richards, Kirklees Councillor.
Jane Dowson, Councillor from Chapel Allen in Leeds.
Councillor Paul Ray, Leeds City Councillor.
Betty Rose, Wakefield Councillor.
I'm Katie Wilby, Corporate Performance Manager.
I'm Sam Bacon, Head of Strategy and Corporate Performance here at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Rees, I'm Chief Operating Officer at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi, Patrick Bowes, Head of Research and Intelligence at the Combined Authority.
Hi, Craig Taylor, Head of Strategic Portfolio Management at the Combined Authority.
Samantha Harvey from Wakefield Rural. Thank you.
Andrew Waller from City of York Council.
Alan Griffiths, Bradford.
Ralph Berry, Councillor Wibsey, Bradford.
Mike Barnes, Calderdale, feeling a bit lonely.
Anyway, all welcome today. Right, so we can start with agenda item 1, and I'll pass over to Khalid for this one.
Formal apologies from Councillor Richard Foster. And obviously we are quorum, 12 members.
Okay. Number 2, item 2, have you received any declarations?
No.
Anybody got any declarations to declare? No. There are no items for exclusion of the press?
None.
So, I wasn't at the last meeting. And item 4, for those that were there, are these a true and accurate record? Yep. Good. In terms of item 5, again, I wasn't present at that one. Is that a true and accurate record? Facing a recollection? Yep. Good. Right, in terms of my comments, just basically welcome. Hopefully we have a good productive year. So far, since I've been put into post, I've met a number of officers, had some excellent briefings and updates on what's happening, and equally I've challenged back again. But anybody who knows me knows that I'm quite capable of challenging back again. And so far it's been a really good start. When it comes to the forward plan, looking for your views to see whether or not you're happy with the general thrust and direction that we're going on. And the only other thing is, the way I try and run these scrutiny boards is make the presumption that everyone has read the papers beforehand, and I don't want officers to come along and effectively read out the report that they've already spent time doing. So that's the way I choose to do things. So that's the only comments and update I've got. Right, item 7, scrutiny and governance arrangements. Khalid, do you want to just briefly introduce what we've got there?
Yep, it's just for members to note the arrangements that were agreed by the Combined Authority at the annual meeting. The terms of reference and standing orders are attached. The Constitution is linked. To note, obviously this committee is a corporate committee and its remit is in Appendix 1 as outlined. Essentially anything that is corporate related, finance, resources, as well as any function that does not fall within the terms of reference of any other OV and Scrutiny Committee. It's just a catch-all to make sure everything is covered, and any function which covers more than one OV and Scrutiny Committee. Although in practice, obviously the other two are transport, infrastructure and economy. In practice, the chairs, we've not had it as much as an issue in the past, but if there was a topic that covered multiple committees, the scrutiny chairs and members often can determine where it's best for a particular issue to go. A reminder about meeting dates should be in everyone's diaries. Obviously, this meeting on the 14th of November, 19th of January, which will be the Mayor's question time. And the last one's on the 8th of March, which has moved from the 15th of March. That one will be in the afternoon. Quorum, reminder about quorum. This meeting is quorum, which is good, but the quorum is set by legislation. It's not something that we set, we have to abide by it. It's 2/3, which is 11 members. Page 12 has the members, the list of members. Again, by law, it has to be politically balanced. The combined authority scrutiny committees have to be chaired by the opposition, that is members of a party different to the mayor. And 2.9 lists all the new members who have joined us for this year. Substitute arrangements. Any member who needs a substitute can be substituted for by anyone from one of the other two scrutiny committees from the same party and council. And if you don't have a pair on another scrutiny committee, you can appoint a personal substitute, and the members who need those are listed in 2.12. And that's everything, really.
Good. Right, any comments? Or happy to approve? Happy to approve, fine. Thank you. Right, item 8 on the agenda, which is the forward plan. Do you want to just briefly outline what's behind that one?
So we did work planning in a meeting in July, informal meeting, where members met in person, and there were some tech issues, but we did follow up with members who weren't able to attend, just to make sure everyone had their views represented. And the resultant work programme is in Appendix 1, which is pages 29 and 30. And for the purposes of the item, just for members to approve and essentially confirm they're happy with obviously the topic on the agenda today, are on the agenda. But there's, for the subsequent meetings in November and January, a couple of the topics don't have dates yet. And there's some suggestions about particular issues that are projects that we haven't assigned dates yet. But any comments?
Yep.
Additions, changes?
Anybody got any comments on the proposed work plan? Are we happy to approve it? Happy to approve it. Right, good. Right, item 9. Right, so it's the first substantive item that we've got today. Now, Katie, are you actually presenting this? I don't care.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sam Bacon, I'm Head of Strategy and Corporate Performance, as I said. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So basically I'm the Head of Service which the Corporate Performance sits under, and kind of performance management and things. The report that's in your pack that you will have seen is authored by my colleague Katie, who works in our Corporate Performance and Planning team. And so we're both here to answer any questions you may have and talk through the report and the things contained within it. We sit under strategy and communications and intelligence, so we used to sit under Alan in his old role. Obviously we are waiting the incoming director, but hence us pointing to Alan because he used to be our director.
I am still responsible for this area of business.
Yeah. But we're here to answer any questions you may have. The report itself, as you'll have seen, is around the process of how we measure the organisation's performance and the things that we look at, the kind of processes we use, and a bit of data about how we're doing in some key areas. We also list in the report, one of the appendixes is the state of the region, which is undertaken by my colleague Patrick, who's sat to my left, who's Head of Research and Intelligence. So any specific questions around the state of the region would be for Patrick, but in general, very happy to take questions on the report if you like.
What I don't want us to try and get involved in is looking at the individual performance measures. That's dealt with by other parts of the combined authority. It's basically the logic and the information that they're getting. Are they getting access to the information that's necessary? Are they putting it in the format? Because when I was getting my briefing, one of the comments I made was that one of the appendices, in my view, was more detailed than the other, and it was explained to me why there was a difference between the two of them. But that's the sort of logic that we're looking at there. do you think it's evidence-based or not evidence-based? And the other things that you might want to look at is how are we actually measuring the performance? What are we using as the baseline for these sort of things? And how we can, well, one of the questions I had, for example, is who's responsible for delivering on those things? Yes, we know who the officer is, but apart from the mayor, is there any other person, elected member, who's got responsibility for ensuring that the delivery is made? Because one thing that did surprise me when I took over chairing this one is that there are no elected members here today to hold to account. And that's unusual, because normally you'd have an elected member, because an officer shouldn't be making any political comments about the logic or otherwise of anything. It should be an elected member, but as was pointed out to me, there is only one elected member actually employed by the Combined Authority, the mayor, and she can't be everywhere doing everything at the same time. So that was one of the surprises I came at when I looked at performance measurement for the first time, was to find out who's actually accountable for delivering the measures here. And so that's part of it. So it's open to you. Anybody, any questions they would like to ask? Here, yeah, Jane.
Sorry, it had to be me, didn't it? I'm just looking at page 39, and I love coloured charts. I think they're great, because you can either tell us a lot or hide a lot of things at the same time. And naturally, we focus on the red ones, and you've got at 2.22.2 a lot of reds and blues suddenly becoming amber. So we're either getting very good at things or very bad at things. We're improving or declining in our. Is that just because you haven't got the statistics yet and you've stuck an amber in, or is that because you actually know that we're improving? And the other thing is, a lot of us actually live in villages and not just towns and cities. By putting towns and cities, you're actually totally dismissing a huge area of the West Yorkshire region, which is actually rural. I personally would like to see that broadened out so that people don't focus just on towns and cities. They focus on the whole of West Yorkshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody like to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So on the first point, in terms of the colours and sort of how do we end up with the RAG rating, and just for people's awareness, the blue is essentially good, it's green. We've changed that because of colour blindness issues and to make it more able to see. Oh, right, fine. Just to double check in case people didn't realise. So it's a new innovation for us. We've only just moved to that system. But the way that we do it is that there's a framework in terms of evidencing that that things have got better. So as you say, if something's moving from say red to amber or amber to blue, that the head of service would sort of demonstrate that you put in your monthly reports. Let's say you're talking about house building. Well, we've done X many more this month, so therefore we're more on track or things are better. That's then signed off by both the director and the kind of DMT. And then ultimately ILB. So it's not just an arbitrary colouring. There's a kind of a succinct process they have to go through to make sure that it's not just kind of we're deciding okay, well, we're going to just change that to make it look better. There has to be an evidence-backed thing. I don't know, Katie, you want to say any more on that, or if that's fine. On the rural point, absolutely, we can look at the language. I'm not sure if that's in one of the particular targets, but if it is, we can certainly go back to that head of service, and we're just about to go into the planning phase for next year, so we can make sure that language is reflected.
Yeah, come back again, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the methodology you use would be quite interesting to know on actually making those decisions. And looking at these, or bearing in mind what the chair said, and there are other committees to look at other elements of this, and it's very topical at the moment that we're looking at the green agenda and sustainability and so on. But a lot of the ones that we've got worse at, or you've got worse at as WICA, are actually initiatives around sustainability. It says nature rich and carbon neutral has gone down, driving economic growth and innovation to enable good jobs has gone down. So a lot of the things that really WICA are here to support seem to have gone gone down, and that's probably just a comment as opposed to a question, because I understand it's not your area.
Alan?
Yeah, happy to comment. So the ratings against these 7 corporate objectives are to do with how the organisation is progressing against the commitments that it's made within its business plan. So the ratings that are in the left-hand column, which in the main report, which talk about the 2023 end-of-year status, that shows to what extent did we achieve the things that we set out to do at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, how well have we done? And so effectively what that's showing is that against the communities, empowering our communities, towns and cities to thrive, there were some things that we missed, and some of those things were to do around the development of a housing strategy, for instance, which we didn't achieve that year, and therefore it was red. And then on creating an accessible, clean and customer-focused transport system, the reason that was red was because of a continuing drop-off in patronage following from COVID. The 2023 current status is to do with the extent to which we are on track to achieve our objectives for the coming year. And so, for instance, something like building a sustainable, nature-rich and carbon-neutral region, that is amber at the moment because there are some areas of the Climate and Environment Plan which we have limited confidence that we would achieve at the end of the year. So I think there's an important distinction to make, which the report tries to do, between what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve as a region, which is set out in the State of the Region report, and the objectives that we're trying to achieve as an organisation. And that table at 2.22.2 is about our organisational objectives for the year.
Okay. Right, I've got Councillor Rose, then Councillor Barnes, then Councillor Ray, and I've just noticed Councillor Roberts as well. So Councillor Rhodes first of all,
Thank
then
you very
Councillor
much.
Barnes.
Councillor Dawson has begun part of what I was going to ask as well. And, you know, I thought mission statements, Chair, had gone out the window a long time ago in reference to how we look at performance indicators and performance actions and outputs. And I'm sorry to be cynical about missions. I think we're gone past the mission statements. We're now into performance indicators. There's a lot of information here. And first of all, Councillor Dawson, Jane mentioned about the colours. We did get a note saying that the RAG system colours have changed. I was actually a bit amazed about that, Chair, because all the authorities out there, I know a lot of them, are still on the old colour RAG regime, where you can make the comparisons with across the patch. And I wonder why that has happened, actually. And colours and numbers can have a lot of work going on underneath that may be a concern that we should be having in our performance indicators. Looking through the charts that we've been given, and I hate that word, do forgive me, missions. No. I wonder, we have columns here, not included in the 2023 report due to data availability issues. Now, I sit in a management board in terms of performance-related issues across the authority. And I'm wondering why we haven't got a first quarter or a second quarter here that we can make comparisons with, rather than a column that tells us nothing. And why don't we have a first quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter? Because they're all very relevant to the financial arrangements and management and accountability and performance across the authority. And I'm sure the same applies for WICA. So can somebody just explain why we're in September, we have no quarter availability here of issues where we have a performance that we can actually say, as Jane has said, we're on track, what was the target, are we reaching the target, if we're not, why not? And I just picked up, I wrote down, do forgive me, Chair, about the housing issue. There was a reason, forgive me, can you go back on that again? But there was a delay in the target about a housing issue.
Yes, it's because in the corporate plan for last year, we had one of our key things that we were going to do is developing a housing strategy. Yes, there were other targets around there around actual delivery of homes, such as the delivery of homes through the Brownfield Housing Fund, yes. Which has got a number of challenges associated with it,
okay.
and might on its own lead to a red rating, but there were some other commitments that we made in the corporate plan which we didn't deliver, and one of them was the development of a new housing strategy.
Okay, thank you. I was here last year and I heard all about that as well. Could you tell us why and where it is on track now? Being as all our authorities, as we know, we have a great shortage of housing. And Chair, don't think I'm picky, but maybe I am. When a statement is made like that in terms of performance indicators and stuff, why haven't we got the reason why in front of us instead of just indicating through a statement that it's not been done? I'm surely that's one of the priorities across all our authorities in relation to housing. And I would actually really see that we're getting more information on all these missions that are here rather than blanks. Do forgive me, Chair, and if I'm being picky, I hope you understand. And officers.
Thanks, Councillor. So I'm going to address a couple of points, and then if I might ask a question of just clarification so I can help the committee as much as possible. So the first is that on the housing, the reason the housing strategy was delayed was entirely to do with internal capacity. So challenges in recruitment, the need to move officers onto other priorities, and so we didn't develop the housing strategy last year. In terms of Brownfield Housing Fund, there have been a number of challenges with it, which have resulted in us not progressing it as quickly as we would like to have done. There are a number of approvals that have recently come through the Combined Authority. So at the last Combined Authority, I'm grappling for the number, but I think at the last Combined Authority there was something like 750 homes approved through the Brownfield House Fund in a range of developments within Leeds, and then there are some other Brownfield Housing Fund schemes coming through the pipeline. So it is now moving, but there are a range of challenges with the Brownfield Housing Fund, largely to do with how you can achieve value for money. So So one of the challenges is that because of the way the government has set the criteria, it is easier to make the case for using the Brownfield Housing Fund in locations in Leeds than it is in other parts of the region. That is not to say that the proposals are only coming forward in Leeds, they are coming through in other parts of the region, but the most recent set of proposals were all Leeds, that's true. But we have recently brought forward around 750 homes as part of the Brownfield Housing Fund. So that's on homes. I'm sorry, Councillor Rhodes, could you just point me to where you're suggesting that we're saying there's no data available?
On pages, when we're looking at the West Yorkshire Plan mission statements, on all of those,
yep.
Every page there, given that information, you have 2 lines for information. New indicators for 23.
I'm with you.
And there's nothing there. I don't see any target rate. What percentage target rate should be against these? Where you're at with it, what you've achieved, and then in the second column, it says not included in 23 report due to data availability issues. Forgive me asking, I started off by, I should ask the question first. Is it not in terms of performance indicators that you look at quarters throughout the year so you can actually see what you're achieving against the targets?
Chair, shall I? Yes. So it depends. So if it depends because of the extent to which we're able to measure particular things. So for example, if we are talking about a skills programme or a business support programme and some of the housing programmes, then the data is available on quite a frequent basis, and we would look to be able to report those. We'd look to report that data maybe quarterly. In terms of the regional indicators, and this is the distinction I was making between those indicators which are about how the region is performing versus how the organisation is performing, some of those data sets are only available on an annual basis, and that's what we report through the state of the region. If I could come to the to Appendix 1, which is page 45 if you're looking online, or labelled page 43, which Councillor Rhodes is referring to. So the purpose of showing those indicators like that is to show you how we have mapped the regional indicators across to the missions in the West Yorkshire Plan. The 2 columns on the right hand side are purely to indicate new things that we have added for the 2023 report, which will be published this autumn, or information which is the column called new indicator for 2023, and then the column called not included in 2023 report due to data availability issues those are, where you've got a Y in there, those are data points which we won't be including in the 2023 State of the Region report. So to Councillor Rhodes' question, which is, so where is the actual data against all of these indicators? If you go further down into the report, there's then a section which is called Summary of Performance Against the Indicators from the 2022 report, and they're all in there with comment. So that's page 40, that's labelled page 46 onwards.
I've seen those. And lastly, Chair, if I may, I think that in terms of performance reports, this is the most complicated way of dealing with things. And if we're dealing region and locally, which obviously I understand we're West Yorkshire, why haven't we got a list of the target items that have been already agreed, what the target in percentage performance is against those? And I don't think it's beyond the wit now of people employed through WICA to actually at a point in time get the relevant performance indicators against targets on a quarterly basis, so the governance of this committee can actually see how the performance of the authority is going.
Just as my interest, are there targets against all of those? Are there actually measurable targets set against all of these, which is not on the, which is not in the public domain in this document?
Yes, so we report quarterly to Financial Resources and Corporate Committee on performance against corporate objectives. They're all in the public domain and they are measurable and published on our website. Happy to share those with the committee if it's helpful.
I had when I was getting my briefing on it, because as local authority people, we are used to getting data, sometimes data overload, quite frankly, in some instances, and we decided what to go forward. But I think we need to take that as a noted point so that we can feed back, because some of the things that we've come here is, maybe saying to them there, should you have, instead of the words mission, should you have use some other way of describing it in the modern world? The data, why the data doesn't appear to be there, and is the problem lack of resource in terms of money or people? Which, if you take Mr. Rees as an example, he's doing 2 jobs at the moment, possibly a number of other behind the scenes as well. Is that the issue, or is it the computer systems aren't good enough? Is it because you're not getting the information in from the feeder authorities to enable you to deliver on some of those things? We need to look into that sort of thing. Yeah, Ben. Sam, sorry.
No problem. Just to say on that second point, so I think that might be, and it's an issue we can take away in terms of before we come back to a future scrutiny committee. I think it's probably in terms of layout. I think we've just maybe slightly confused the committee, so that the data that Councillor Rhodes is talking about is further down in the report. It's just the way the table where it says this data is not included in 2023. It's basically talking about the state of the region, but I think that the actual data and kind of how we're performing and things is further down. So we basically, I think we need to change the format to make it a bit clearer next time.
One thing you probably do have to look at, if you look at page 69 plus, you've got a lot of detail on that, and as we were all coming in one by one this morning, the comment we all made was, that's small writing and it takes a lot to understand. And I made the same comment when I was getting briefed on it as well. So we've gone from not a lot of information in one appendix to probably too much in another, and it's how you get somewhere in between. It's an art, to be quite frank, of getting the balance right, because people need information, but at the same time it needs to be meaningful information. So I think the point's been made. I think the point will be noted, and the next time we get the information, it will have changed for the better. I think that's probably the way we'll leave.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, so I've got Councillor Barnes, then Councillor Ray, and then Councillor Lee Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd just like to echo the point on regarding comparative data, the availability of it and the timing of it being recent. We flagged this at Strategy and Performance and called it out regularly, and it's still the same issue year on year. In terms of the KPIs, who determine which KPI indicators will be used. I'm just conscious of the fact that one of the mayor's pledges is about protection of women and young girls, and yet there's nothing in here about domestic violence. Is the indicators, and if we look at what's happened during the pandemic, I would have thought domestic violence would have been contained within there as a core indicator. So the cynic in me suggests, are these indicators being chosen because they're the most favourable? But hey, shouldn't be cynical. And also, are they challenging enough? Because if you look at B3, and in particular, B4, what is it? Over 150 whole households posted to residents. 150. I mean, that's a street. Or 2 streets. And it's overachieved. So I just wonder. And then we had, 5 residents engaged. Sorry, I should have my other glasses on with a magnifying glass to read the data. Sorry about that. I mean, are these KPIs really challenging? Because 100 households, I mean, to be honest, that's a day's work. It's not really a challenging issue. Any of us campaign would do 100 knock on 100 houses in a couple of hours. So are we really happy that some of these KPIs, and in particular those that are on, and that one is blue, are really challenging? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Chair. So to answer the question about domestic violence and domestic abuse, so the Mayor's objectives for policing and crime are set out in the statutory police and crime plan, and a quarterly performance report about that is published and goes to the police and crime panel, which is the body responsible for scrutinising the Mayor's work on policing and crime. However, we absolutely do not want to separate that from the rest of the combined authorities' work or the rest of the reporting, which is why Mission 5 in the West Yorkshire Plan is about creating a safe West Yorkshire with a number of objectives associated to it. I have to say, having just looked at the list there, I do think it's a good point about domestic abuse. Actually, I think maybe we should add that in as a line into the State of the Region report, because we have got in there rape and sexual offences and so on. I think it would make sense for us to make sure that we're including domestic abuse in that as well. There's also there's a strategy about the safety of women and girls which sits underneath the police and crime plan, which has a number of indicators associated with it as well. So that's on the police and crime area, and definitely we'll take away that point about including domestic abuse in the State of the Region. On the 150 homes point, I absolutely get that. And what this is about is retrofit. So the climate and environment plan, which sets out what needs to be done across the region in order to achieve net zero by 2038, sets out that we need to retrofit 700,000 homes across the region. That is going to take a huge effort, which is why you'll see things like something referred to as the Better Homes Hub, which we're setting up, which is looking to enable us to accelerate whole house retrofit. That 150 figure, which I completely agree is a microscopic number compared with 700,000 homes, is because it refers specifically to a programme in Manningham, which was funded through the Community Renewal Fund and was effectively a pilot scheme that would then inform how we roll out whole house retrofit elsewhere in the region. So that's why the number is so low.
Would it not have been advisable to actually reference that?
Does it not say?
Yeah.
But okay. Fair enough. Point taken.
Okay, Councillor Ray, then Councillor Lee Roberts.
So my questions have already been asked.
Okay, Councillor Lee Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I don't know if I misread it, but on this RAG rating form that we've been given on B6 on the building and sustainable, nature rich and carbon neutral region, it says ensure all fossil fuel usage continues to be purchased from renewable sources. I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's broken it. I've never seen that before, flashing green line. I think that's on. Thank you. So, colleagues, I agree that the wording there does not make particular sense. It should say ensure all energy usage continues to be purchased from renewable sources. So apologies for that. So our gas and electricity contracts for the combined authority are from 100% renewable sources. Thank you for pointing out.
My apologies, I did go to Specsavers, believe it or not, last week for an eye test. I just got a mental block.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yes.
Sorry.
Just wanted to very briefly return to page 39 of the. It shouldn't have struck me at the time. I'm sorry, I didn't have my hand up quickly, so we may have lost the point, if not lost the plot. The end of year status of, let's take the first one, is red, because that's what it was like at the end of the year. Year. The current status is amber, presumably because we're halfway through and you're not sure what's going to happen really, so you can't say it's all online. That's fair enough. What I'm wondering is what has happened to the things that didn't get done at the end of 22-23. Have they been abandoned and taken and forgotten? In which case, why were they worth putting in the first place if you can afford to not worry about them? Are they still being dealt with? In which case, what is the process for seeing whether a late success in 22-23 has happened? You know, we picked it. We may not have done it by the end of 23. We finally got there halfway through 23-24. Or are they in the 23-24? Have they been rolled into 23-24? In which case, is it not a bit ambitious to say that they're all that's lurched forward into amber rather than because there's you've not just got this year's targets and things to do, but you're actually trying to catch up on last year's as well.
I'm happy to come back on that. So, in short, the answer is that where things haven't been picked up in a particular year, we then review those as part of the annual business planning process. So at that point each year, which we're going through at the moment, we allocate resources and officer capacity to make sure we're hitting our objectives in an appropriate way. So we reprioritise year on year to meet our long-term objectives. So things may well have been rolled over, but without getting into specifics on each programme, it's difficult to answer that in any depth.
Just very briefly, so what is the process for reporting, presumably to the appropriate committee, not necessarily to us, that what's been, if you like, rolled on and how you're going with it, what's been abandoned and why, and so we can sort of scrutinise that.
Yep, so that comes through Internal Leadership Board, where we review performance monitoring.
And there'll be so each year there's a business planning process which takes place internally, and then there are reports that come through to Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee and then the Combined Authority. So working back from February, when the Combined Authority has to set its budget for next year, there's a draft budget and business plan presented to the Combined Authority in November or early December, and that will make reference to performance in the previous year and how, and therefore the things that we are currently having trained that we possibly won't achieve this year and therefore need to be rolled over. It would be set out through that process.
Yes, some comments and some questions. I've been going down this list. I'm on page 49, and it's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it, really? The north-south divide does exist. We earn a lot less in the country, but I think it's down to a lot of good work by local authorities across the piece that the proportion of people receiving the real living wage is actually higher than it is nationally, so that's quite good. But it'd be nice to know what the authority is doing with its staff to make sure that we are actually narrowing our gap and paying a more appropriate fee. You know, a burger at McDonald's costs the same here as it does in London. You know, things that cost the same, and yet the people living up north are earning a lot less. That can't be right. Page 50, enabling a skilled and diverse workforce. You take it up to 64. I'm not sure how far back these figures go because the retirement age isn't 64 anymore. I've just had my 65th birthday and I can't retire now until I'm 66. And incidentally, Barry, I have no intention of retiring either. But you know, the 64 just seems a bit of an arbitrary figure now and quite historical. Things are moving on. Especially for women, who are severely disadvantaged by the increase, by not having enough time to prepare going forward for this having to work longer. Financially, absolutely. And page 57, you have got on page 57 the greenhouse gas emissions by sector, and it takes us all the way from 2005 to 2020. And it's just to note that transport isn't faring too well, and I thought we'd had a big push on electric with the contractors and so on, but no doubt transport will be picking that up. But it does seem quite surprising how poorly performing that is, because of the emphasis on it. And just one comment, the Better Homes Hub, absolutely fantastic. Retrofit is great. But as somebody who tried to apply for the last round of government grants and couldn't get any contractors to actually come to my house, and I live in an ex-local authority, leaks like a sieve, wooden floor, cavity, insulation needed house, couldn't get any contractors, and you have to have an energy efficiency certificate, I understand, as well this time. What has been done by the authority to skill up and plan for what is needed for the next round of government grants, or are you as much in the dark as everybody else? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back. Respond on a few things, and then I'll bring other colleagues in. So, on the issue of wages and living standards, so the organisation currently pays a living wage supplement to a number of staff in the combined authority to ensure that they receive the living wage, even though their base pay band is not. Sorry, the real living wage. Good question. I'm not 100% sure, but we can find out. So we'll find that. We'll find that out. However, we consulted earlier this year about how to build living wage payments fully into everybody's salary, so that the organisation can become a living wage foundation. I know you want me to come back on the real living wage. I realised, yeah. So we'll come back on that. I'll have to come back to the committee on the real living wage point. The second thing is that one of the Mayor's pledges was to introduce a Fair Work Charter for West Yorkshire, which is going to be launched in November, and we will have a number of businesses and other organisations signed up to it from across the region, and that will support organisations to become fairer employers across a range of issues. It's not just to do with pay, it's also to do with conditions, security, learning and development, diversity and inclusion. On carbon, Patrick might want to come in on this, but transport is certainly one of the more challenging. I mean, the carbon agenda is challenging across the piece. 40%, if memory serves me rightly, 40% of carbon emissions in West Yorkshire come from transport, and 95% of those transport emissions come from private car use. So trying to get people to drive their private cars and their private fossil fueled cars less and more into public transport is one of the key objectives of the organisation, and that's why we're bringing in hopefully building a mass transport system for the region, etc. So, but I certainly recognise that the line on transport is not moving as quickly as we would like it to. And on Better Homes Hub, so we've been developing up plans for the Better Homes Hub over the last year or so, and it is going to be a major project for the organisation. And one of the strands that's in there is around how do you develop the workforce that's necessary to deliver the change, because one of the challenges in whole house retrofit is the lack of people with the necessary skills to actually do it. So it's one of the that target I referred to earlier about 700,000 homes being required. 700,000 homes needing to be retrofitted. One of the strands of the Better Homes Hub work is about how we develop people with the necessary skills to support us with it. Patrick, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah.
The age 64 point.
Yeah. On that point about the employment rate, that's an official sort of ODS definition. So the reason why they choose that, because it's harmonised, so it enables comparison between sort of the UK and areas in the UK and other countries, so it's a harmonised definition. I mean, ONS are acutely aware of this, so it's a definition-based, originally designed by the OECD, or Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, and they are reviewing that. So there's quite a lot of change happening at the moment on international indicators. So you know, the committee may have seen recently that the government's changed the way they're calculating GDP, and that's to reflect you know, improvements in it, and those changes are being rolled out in other countries. So that's why it's 16 to 64. Clearly, we can provide information on the employment rate for different age groups as well. So you know, that can be reflected in the commentary in State of the Region. But that's why we choose that one, because it allows us to compare not only West Yorkshire with the UK, but other countries as well.
Yeah, it's on the was it 80 or 90% being people driving their own fuel cap vehicles. 2 points on that particular one. Number one, there is not enough investment or enough pre-planning around electric charging points. A large proportion of my residents, and no doubt in Bradford and all around the live in houses where people cannot have electric charging points in their own homes because they live in terraces, and you're not allowed to have an electric cable. There must be a solution. It would be nice to know if WICA are leading the way on trying to find a solution to allow people to charge from their own homes, because there are not enough electric charging points, leading to people making very poor decisions. And I need to change my car now. Do I go to an electric charging point where I'll have to maybe queue for ages to wait to get to a charging point somewhere? Or do I actually buy another fossil fuel vehicle? I know which way I'm going to go. I'm going to hopefully make the right decision, which is the electric one. But it makes life very difficult because of, and what are we doing as WICA to try and find solutions to these problems around electric car charging? Because for me, you probably missed the early conversation, I live in a village on the edge of Leeds, and there is not a direct bus into Leeds from my village at all. And it is one of the main villages, it's on the map, and yet there is no direct bus from my village into Leeds. So please don't tell me to get onto a bus that doesn't exist. And just the other thing around retrofit, I mean, the hub will be great. Have you got a time scale on this? And can you tell me what work WICA are doing with the various building colleges around Leeds to try and encourage people who will go to the of varying ages, they're not just young people, into a career that will actually tick all the boxes for you? Thank you.
Okay. So I recognise the challenge around electric charging points at home. We have installed a number of electric charging points across the region. You're going to probably scoff at the number. Last year, I think it was 88, which of course is not enough. We want to do more. Yeah, I'm sure. Right. It's not enough. What I would add is that it's not simply a case of putting, say we had, if we had all the money there is and we installed accessible electric charging points across all the homes in West Yorkshire, it still wouldn't work properly because the grid can't take the power. So there's a whole system solution that's required to this that is a national problem. The national grid not being able to carry sufficient power for there to be universal charging at the moment. Which is not to say we're kind of shrugging our shoulders and at it. I can't remember what precisely the arrangements are that we've got right now for installing more, but I'm pretty sure that through at least one of the transport programs that we've got going, we are putting some more electric charging points in, and we'll have to come back to the committee on that. In terms of the point about not everybody has the opportunity to use public transport, absolutely recognise that, and that's why we are looking at a range of reforms to the transport system, including exploring changes to the bus market. And then what else did you ask about? You asked about are we working with the building colleges around the Better Homes Hub? I believe we are. I would have to come back to the committee on specifics. It's a very good. If we are not, I will be surprised, and certainly it will be something for the team to take on board. But I think we're working with Leeds College. Yeah.
Right to the relevant chairs to bring it to their attention so that they're, for example, the employment scrutiny side need to look into the points that Councillor Dowson's just made and bringing them to the attention. It unfortunately comes back to the point I was making about political accountability. It's fine us pinpointing you and saying, can you do this, this and this, but it's political initiatives that are needed in order to do things. You're implementing and doing everything you possibly can within the constraints you've been given. We need to get over the political impetus. It doesn't matter whether that's at central government or whether it's at WICA or whether it's in our own local authorities. All three need to have the political will to implement these things, and that's the point.
And finally, you'll be pleased to hear, with regard to the electric charging points, and I'm potentially speaking on my ward and potentially areas in Bradford. Bradford already has the low emission zone already. There are a huge number of taxi and private hire drivers that live in my area and areas of Bradford. Who are being encouraged, not least because of zones and so on, to buy electric cars. So I think it is, especially in those areas that have got restrictions, to maybe concentrate on them at the expense of other areas, because we do need to look at, because you've got ticks and marks against employment and so on and so forth, and yet we're making it very hard for some areas of the community to actually employ, work at their jobs because we're not providing the infrastructure to enable them to do that. So that's just a point. No need to.
I'm pleased Councillor Dowson said that, because now as her local councillor, I don't have to push for it anymore because.
I like my local council to know that there are no electric charging points in my village. So not only can I not get a bus, I can't charge an electric car either.
Sorry, we are just having our usual banter between the two of us. Yeah, right.
Just following on in the electric vehicle, as a recent adopter of an electric vehicle, there's a solution to what you're talking about being adopted. A friend of mine, as a councillor in Brent, has shown, but it requires putting cabling and dropping points like little covers. You keep it in your boot. When you pull up on the terrace street, you take the charging tower, plug it into the pavement, and then connect it to your car, and when you leave, you move it away. But the point Alan was making about the quality of the grid is the main problem. As those of us who've watched exploding substations, things over the years, and as the son of an electrical engineer, you would be shocked to know how old the grid is in some of your areas. I work in James Ward. They've just redone much of the electricity cabling around that area. It's 60 years old, some of it. You're talking, people used to have to wedge bits of wood into the switches to blow it to find out where it was. So on that, okay. And I think that point about areas, so we've just got the emission zone. We've just had the first reporting in Bradford on the impact of that emission zone. And believe me, I've had fun as a councillor with that. I'm passionately committed to health for young children, and the research we got in Born in Bradford, Alan and I, different parties, we agree on this. But what we've just seen is it's making a real impact. Bradford is a geographic bowl, but Jane is right. Actually, many of my constituents in Wibsey drive taxis in Leeds as well. And there's quite a lot of them, it's not that far. But I think that's a point that needs following up. I was just going to make a quick point on the way we describe things. I think quite a lot, when I have sympathy for the officers here, because I have to write reports for a board in another place, which I'm going on to later. I have sympathy. But when I was looking at housing affordability and rented housing costs, I think a comparison with the national isn't really very relevant to the lives of the people I see at my surgery. The reality is housing is becoming more and more unaffordable. A comparison with Surrey and Hampshire is of no relevance to my day-to-day experience. The fact is it's got worse. So housing in West Yorkshire is relatively affordable to the national average. Is a point of such banality as to be irrelevant really, because what I would say is housing affordability in West Yorkshire has become more of a problem because housing supply is reduced and all the things we talk about retrofit. But when we're giving headline figures, I find those comparisons with other places a little bit unhelpful. But I'm familiar with what that takes to get your reports refined. I live with it every day. So that was all I was going to say. And then the retrofitting. You know, Wibsy's got houses that go back 300-400 years. So I've seen what it takes to retrofit. This is a huge job. But if we can start talking about this, it's a bit of a concept. We need to prefigure what people are thinking about. This is outside of people's experience. You're talking about lining every room in your house, doing every floor. You're talking about putting another layer of what is, I mean, the house I live in, built 1905, and its plaster is made of the slack from the fires of Lister's mill. So when you try and put up a shelf, you get through 3 drills before you've actually put up a shelf. That needs something about that thick to go into it. But every local authority is also giving improvement grants to certain people, DFG grants and everything. I mean, I wonder if there's any possibility of combining some of those. Every house I've seen that needs a DFG grant will be on your list for. But let's do that. So the main point I was on to make is how we describe things, but also on the EV strategy. If we can look at charging by some other priorities than just a head count, which I think what Jane's suggesting, because the scale of what you're talking about here is absolutely huge, and the streets we're talking about, similar to Hare Hills, is you would need to have something akin to what they're doing in Brent, which is to equip people with something they can lift their boot and plug it into the pavement. Thank you.
Do anyone want to come back on that, or just note them?
No, so it's for noting really.
Right, so I've got Councillor Reid, Councillor Waller, Councillor Harvey, and Councillor Lee Richards.
Yeah, and it sort of follows on from the point I was just made, and I think it's more of a general point from the conversation. There's lots of information, but there's very little narrative. And a lot of the questions you've got today is about when there's a problem, tell us why there's a problem, rather than just saying there's a problem, because actually all the questions from members today have been, why is that a problem? Why that information that way? And from a scrutiny perspective, we're interested in understanding why there's a problem so that we can scrutinise it and have that conversation. So the general point is, I get there's a lot of information, and I'm sure we have this conversation in our own scrutinies in our own local authorities. Tell us the narrative in detail, just don't tell us the headline figure, which goes back to your statement about missions. Not bothered about the mission, I'm bothered about why the mission hasn't happened. If that makes sense.
Okay, right, Councillor Waller, then Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Lee Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on thinking on a regional basis, which is written into some of the strategies. In terms of the connectivity of the grid, there has been discussions. Northern Power Grid had lots of online sessions with councillors talking about across the region what they were doing to enable the power to get to the streets so that people could have electric cars charging there without blowing the grid. And my ward had a particular problem with Northern Power Grid blowing it up, and it was because of the age of pre-war boxes. So I think there's a lot of talk. It's understanding the delivery of that, and following up the discussion on retrofit. The strange sense of deja vu. The Leeds City Region HCA bid DEEP project was to do that very task, recognising it wasn't going to be done in 1 year. It was about building capacity, about the conversations with skills suppliers, and in particular pre-1919 terraced housing being a major issue. So it's understanding. There's been a lot of talk about both of those. It's understanding that we're actually getting to a solution, which is enabling people in West Yorkshire to think, well, I can drive my electric car outside of this bubble because you'll be able to charge it. So I think it's a wider problem to ensure that that's covered as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Harvey and then Councillor Lee Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Very simple 2 questions. The first one is,
about the evaluation of local mayors fair, is under the way. I understand. Has it been completed, and what are the findings look like? Number one. Number two, the M card ticket transactions is still well below the 2019 level, and we talk a lot about car journeys, emission, all that. But the public transport at the moment with the buses, it's just almost non-existent. So some area in Wakefield, bordering Barnsley, so the parents has thrown away two schools. Parents have to send the kids to, another local authority school, but it's not even in West Yorkshire, so they are not qualified for Zoom. Their bus passes and cards not applied. So can we do something about the two mayoral authorities? Look into it. Some family would have 3 children going to college, going to school, and have to pay a much higher fare just because that they are living on the border of West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So I think those need to be looked into. Yeah.
Alan?
Thank you. Well, we'll have to look into the cross-border issue. I mean, as everyone will know, it's a deregulated bus market, and one of the key things that the mayor and the MCA and West Yorkshire can potentially benefit from is reforms to the bus market now that we are a devolved authority, if you were to look at the papers for next week's combined authority, which have just been published, you'll see that there is going to be a conversation at the combined authority next Thursday about proposed changes to the bus market, although no decisions have yet been taken on it. On the point around bus patronage, Patrick can comment on this, but essentially, ever since COVID, there has been a drop-off in bus patronage, and we are not yet back to pre-COVID levels, are we? Quite. But I'll bring Patrick in to talk about it.
Yes, we're still not back to sort of pre-COVID levels. So average sort of bus usage hovers between sort of 82 and 85% of where we were in that sort of pandemic sort of baseline, which is sort of March 2020. I think on the point around sort of mayor's fares, if I can come back on that point, yes, we are evaluating the impact of mayor's fares. We are currently sort of following DFT's national methodology for fare capping, and we are undertaking sort of primary research with users of the bus network and non-users of the bus network to not only understand the impact of mayor's fares, but the effect it's had on that decision. If you're not using a bus, has it shifted your view about using a bus, and so try and understand that holistically, what those issues are around that. So we're actually undertaking that research as we speak. And I think the point on M cards there, I think I would need to check this, but that particular indicator there, I don't think that information, that graph actually shows the M card trips that are captured using the M card app. And there's an increasing proportion of bus users who are using the M card app that's on the mobile phone. So I'd need to check that, but I think I would just add that qualification to that. But I can check that for the committee.
Yeah. On the issue of cross-border working, is there a group that does meet within one of the things that in local government we're meant to do is to cooperate with our near neighbour councils, whether we do or whether we don't. We could have a wonderful debate about that sometime down the line.
There are no buses in North Yorkshire.
But is there a body that actually exists for cross-border meetings to talk about commonality? Because there are arbitrary borders, to be quite frank. Where West Yorkshire begins and ends is actually quite arbitrary. It's not. Well, we could have a wonderful debate about where it begins and ends, but there is going to be an effect. I mean, Councillor Dowson was referring to a bus that she would like to come through Poole, so would I. But part of the issue was it does affect North Yorkshire, and trying to get agreement is the issue, because they don't necessarily always have the same preferences as we do in West Yorkshire for various things, and that can have a big impact. So is there such a thing as a body where cross-border issues are being discussed, or is this something that Scrutiny could suggest is looked into?
Certainly, Scrutiny can suggest it's looked into. If I could just give a few points in response to how the landscape looks at the moment. So certainly there are conversations between the operators and the local transport bodies, of which we are one. So there's definitely those conversations that happen where there are routes that travel across borders between, say, West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester, or West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, and West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire. The second is that the combined authority itself has already considered some cross-border issues, and if I'm maybe so bold, that's partly represented by the fact that Councillor Waller is here from the City of York Council. With the City of York is a non-constituent member of the combined authority, and that is partly to do with the very close economic ties between York and Leeds. The next thing I mentioned is, there is a body which is informal in the sense that it's non-statutory, but the Yorkshire Leaders Board brings together all of the leaders of all of the councils from across Yorkshire and Humberside, with the existing mayors within Yorkshire, so Oliver Coppard and Tracy Brabin, and in the future that would include the incoming mayor of York and North Yorkshire from next year. So that body meets to consider Yorkshire-wide issues. The mayor has regular conversations with her counterparts in South Yorkshire and Greater Manchester. And the other final point on this to mention is that, of course, we have Transport for the North, which meets as a board considering northern transport issues. And there's both a board and a partnership board, which brings together a range of stakeholders from across the north to consider region-wide issues.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Lee Richards and then Councillor Ray.
Just a quick comment on the EV charging, because I've been driving an EV for 9 years. So got a rather elderly Nissan Leaf that's not easy to charge with them, people switching to the CCS chargers.
Slow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a problem apart from that when they provide chargers, you get mostly CCS ones, so you can't charge if you've only got one option. So I waited an hour the other day to charge up, and I only needed 20 minutes to get home. In some areas, I think it's mainly Scotland, they're putting in like small charging hubs at sort of commercial sort of areas, like where people go to shop, so that they can charge while they're shopping. And quite often they put up the solar panels and have a battery storage system. Would that work in some of the more rural areas? Is that something that the combined authority would be considering? Thank you.
Mr. Rees?
So similar point, I think, is that so one of the park and rides, I think it's Sturton, which we funded, does have a facility that sounds similar to that. So where people you can go there and park your car all day, and it's there are solar panels on the roof, and then that enables the cars to be charged. In terms of the wider kind of technical specification, it goes beyond my expertise, I'm afraid. So we would need to take that away and consider it.
You're responsible for many things, but not that one.
I'm here to be scrutinised on any subject that the committee cares to question us on.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I thought you said he wasn't political.
Sorry, just one more comment. If you're rolling out the more charges, the ones in Kirklees are not always reliable. So, they might be there, but they're not always working. There's been quite a few technical issues. I'm not too bad. I'm fortunate to have a drive. I can charge at home most of the time. But if I need a quick charge, sometimes they're often down. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Just a question just on the bus patronage figures in terms of the methodology. In Leeds, we've seen bus patronage shift on day. So when you're doing your data analysis, are you giving an overall figure, or are you looking at granularly the shift in passenger habits? So, for example, we've seen a massive shift in Leeds to the weekend, but losses during the midweek, because obviously that would then inform some of those conversations over ticketing regimes, route regimes. So how granular is the data getting down to in terms of actually, it's not just that bus patronage is down, but actually the habit of bus usage has changed because of the nature of, particularly in the bigger cities and towns, how people are interacting with their city centres?
Yes, it's just at a very high level. It's a very average figure. But you're absolutely right. The peaks have changed. It's not just true of bus travel. It's true of car transport. So the peaks have very much changed. They're very different. And yeah, as you say, both we've not only seen it with bus, but we've seen it with rail as well. There's more of a shift to travel at weekends. So we do obviously State of the Region reflects a fairly high level to be able to allow us to compare, but we do more detailed analysis. We have a sort of a state of transport report that goes into a lot more detail around this information. We also provide a lot of ongoing monitoring around that, so we do have that. So we do understand the bus network, its peaks. We do understand the radial sort of, road network and its peaks, and we also look at the rail network as well. Obviously, we don't have as much access to rail data in the way that we would like, but we still know where those peaks are. So we do use other information. This just sort of summarises at a very high level.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Which goes back to my point earlier about narrative, because actually from a scrutiny perspective, understanding there's a narrative under that figure informs questions for us to scrutinise. So I get that you're giving us a top level figure. That doesn't help scrutiny.
No, it doesn't.
We need that information so we can scrutinise.
That's fine. Good. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Supporting Paul and Jane's and various comments that have been made around the table today. Forgive me saying this, I was actually looking to see when we got on the table, did we have binoculars or magnifying glasses? And I will say this in my home authority as well. And somehow, sometimes what I get the view is that what we're presented with are working officer documents. Without the narrative, without the objectives, without the targets, without the priorities, that we can actually say, well done, or if it's below the target, why? That's the scrutiny issue. That this is an overview of what we're seeing here, but we haven't got the narrative, we have no details. I believe we've got officer working documents in terms of performance monitoring and outcomes. And I would like to see, as Paul has just said, where we've got the topics here that have been actually identified as priorities, why aren't we getting the performance levels of those and reasoning, and then we can actually see where the WICA is going. There's been a few issues in terms of responses, and I'm sure you, Chair, and Hannah and Khalid have made note of. And I've just written down in terms of, I believe that there are issues that we should be getting a report back, and not at the next meeting, but before. When I asked about the quarterly outcomes and performance levels, why weren't we getting them, which would help us tremendously, Katie replied that yes, they do come round because these are sent to the financial department quarterly. And I believe I got that right, Katie, because I wrote it down. But if that's the case, then they're going quarterly to the finance department. Why aren't we at least getting an overview of what's going to see why we can be satisfied with the targets or whatever? Obviously, they're all dependent on budgets, I know that. So that's that one, and I'm sure when Katie goes back in the offices, we can assume that they're going to dig into that and send a reply to you, Chair, which you can send out to us. On the buses, many years ago, my late husband used to sit on this committee and visited various places in terms of bus usage and quality contracts.
Yes,
I'm sure you've heard quality contracts for buses were a big part of the future development of the bus service, the bus users. I don't think that that's gone far enough in terms of expecting the quality that people out there really need. But, and I put a big but on it, that's not all on your shoulders, because the bus service, as we know, we had a lot of bus drivers leave the service, and particularly any nationals that wanted to go home. And then we had bus drivers who went on to haulage because they had better incomes to look to in dire times. Now, I can tell you where I live, just off the M1 in Wakefield, where we used to have 3 buses coming down the main outlet from M1 into Wakefield. We now have 1. One, as far as our rural areas are concerned in the southeast of the district, and Samantha is part of it, and I know Jane's mentioned it, and we all have an area out there which is outside of consideration of how people get to work and how they get home from work. The other aspect in terms of usage is the reduction there's been in bus service itself. Question, is that down to A, the contract, or B, the inability to recruit drivers? We have a situation where across our district, and we're trying to get car users off the road. If we didn't have car users and trying to look to development and opportunities for jobs outside of the city, as everybody is doing, we wouldn't have people that would be able to go to work, probably, but they couldn't get home at night. And that even applies to our health service staff. So even though we're saying that the bus usage is not up as it was pre-pandemic, what is the ability to do something about that in terms of your contracts? And the next question is this. I think all of us, and I mean the news of late in terms of the green agenda is disturbing. I think all of us in terms of the green agenda, what we want, we're actually looking through my own health scrutiny at the impact on people's health through emissions.
Yep. And
that's actually going to be a report that's going to go through to the Integrated Care Partnership Board through other scrutinies as well. The health agenda is obviously a result of the emissions for the green agenda. But there is another problem. The cost of either the dual opportunity in cars or the single, in terms of somebody trying to buy one of these cars now, and the impact of the cost of living is pushing it back. It's pushing it back. And we need to be aware that Jane quite rightly has pointed out about the charging points, and there's still a bit of mystery about them in terms of how far can how long will it take my car to be charged? I saw one that actually said 12 hours. And then how far will that 12 hours charge take me? Do we plot on the way, like they do on the Google chair, where it tells you where the next petrol station is, which is amazing because then you know where you're going. Is there some mapping across the districts? And I know you perhaps discussed this in transport. Is there some mapping that says to somebody, well, don't worry because within so many miles you have a charger?
Yes.
And that would help people. You got it?
There's apps.
Good.
But I'm afraid the point that Jane and others make is they're frequently out of service.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I think we've got right. I've got first of all it's Sam Bacon and then Alan Rees indicated. So if you want to go first, Sam.
Yes. Flashing green, but I'll try and
Oh my.
There we go. No problem. No problem. So I just want to brief on the points about the report itself. So as I mentioned, I'm the head of service responsible for the report that we're talking about and how it's been produced. I just want to say we've absolutely take the committee's points in terms of stronger narrative focus. The aim of this particular report today was to try and give the committee a sense of the process by which the organisation, the different things that we do to monitor performance, to measure performance. So things like, say, the region, things like the West Yorkshire Plan missions, and our kind of internal corporate reporting. So the bits that are particularly very small writing, and I completely agree that they are. I've lost my glasses, so I'm struggling, unfortunately, but they are bits from our internal documents, the small writing bit, but that was to try and show that they're kind of lift the lid a little bit on this is some of the background that we use, and these are some of the KPIs that are there, and to draw through some of the kind of main overviews of how we're doing different bits. So it was more a kind of process document, this one, but absolutely here the committee's kind of desire for a bit more narrative next time, and we'll make sure that it may mean we have to the pages are longer because we zoom in basically, so the writing's not quite so small, but yeah, basically as a document, like I say, I'm responsible for that, so we'll pick up those points. As to the other points, I'll come back.
Mr. Rees.
Thank you, and I think that Councillor Oates, when you you refer back to Katie's comments earlier. What she was talking about was the Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee, which is a public committee chaired by the Mayor. So one of the papers is Appendix 2 within the pack is the paper that went to FRCC in June. We recognise that there are improvements that we need to make to this, absolutely, and so we've recently reformed the way that we are doing our internal reporting, and that will then translate into our external reporting. So next time the committee sees this, it will look different, and we'll take on board the feedback that you've given to us today. If I could pick up some of the other points, please. So on bus and the existence of services, 40 years ago the bus market was deregulated. They're taking steps this weekend in Greater Manchester to introduce bus franchising. Next week, at the combined authority, members of the CA are going to be asked to be given the go-ahead for a public consultation into how buses should be run across the region, and that follows an assessment into the options for how buses are run. That assessment, there's quite a statutory process to go through. The assessment has been through an independent audit process, and that has concluded that franchising is the preferred option, subject to a public consultation. And bus franchising would give the combined authority control over the routes, frequency, fares and overall standards. We talked about standards of the region's buses, and contract bus operators to run these on its behalf. The assessment stated that franchising would offer clear strategic benefits by helping the combined authority to achieve its ambitions for an integrated transport system, which is more affordable, convenient and greener, improving connectivity and getting people where they need to go. But it's important to note that this is all subject to the combined authority agreeing to go to public consultation and the results of that process, and then there is a decision that the Mayor would take on the future of the region's bus services next spring. Okay.
On the priority for buses, I'm hopefully we'll be feeding into that process. I see what they've done in Manchester, and I'm aware of what my colleague Councillor Rose is talking about in terms of quality partnerships. Firstly, there's huge variability between the services and employment conditions, terms and satisfaction rates between providers. I'm not in a name and shame business, but there are some providers who seem to be able to retain and develop staff and deliver better services than others. And there's a couple of them that have been on the market to be offloaded by their parent companies for some time. I don't know where we've got to with that, but ownership and control, one maybe ending up leading to the other. But I want to talk about the impact of the unreliability of the bus services on people's well-being, because I work in a mental health charity. And in order to access much of the support that many of the people that I work with, is they need to be coaxed out. Lockdown still left a long legacy on many people's confidence in moving about and accessing things, and I had it this morning because I did a trip down to Beeston this morning to my work HQ before I came in here to drop some equipment off and come back. So I've got one of the Mayor's Fair bus tickets, and then I'm off to Jane's Ward after this. I had that incredible Leeds thing of the disappearing bus that was 5, 4, 3, 2, gone. And if you out of your house for the first time in ages to go to a support group to help address your well-being, and you've decided you'll take a bus to go 3 or 4 miles to a place you haven't been before, to meet people you haven't met before, to begin to engage in some support, and that happens, that's a real problem for a lot of people. And then there's my constituency in Wibsey, which is quite close to the reality for Bradford. Is a lot of the jobs that I want people in my ward to get will be in Leeds, because Leeds has got a lot of land that is being regenerated. I remember Paul's ward when it was industrial dereliction. It's now even with new developments and everything south of the station. But if you're a 20-year-old young person and you get a job in that area at the bottom of the M1 in Leeds, and you need to be at work for 7:30 in the morning and you don't have a car, there is no way. Can't get there. There isn't a bus. There's no way of doing it unless you can afford a taxi. So we're constraining people's economic potential, and we're also constraining their well-being potential by both the lack of the scale of the network, but one of the fundamental problems in Leeds I experienced myself, but also in other areas, is the reliability, but that does tend to fall by provider. But I want that fed in, because being able to access all the things in various, you can't have everything within a 2-mile radius of people's homes. You've got to be able to support people moving around. It's important for their well-being, particularly as people, when they're rehoused, are rarely rehoused near their families now because of the pressure on council housing and social housing. You can't guarantee that if you're rehoused on the waiting list, you'll be anywhere near your relatives. You'll be in a house that is available, and that's it. And if you turn it down, you're off the list.
Okay, thank you.
And it is a direct question. How versatile is Wyker and its providers of bus services to respond quickly to changing need? You know, if there is a job opportunity, or I don't think there's still a bus to the sports to John Charles from the main road and so on. How agile is Wyker in conjunction with its providers?
Therese.
So at the moment, the vast majority of routes across the region are set by private operators. They're not set by.
So we have any influence at all on that?
So we have some influence through the Bus Alliance partnership that we currently have got with the operators. We have some influence, and we fund as well a number of routes which are socially desirable but economically unviable. However, there is limited money, and so difficult choices are made about what routes go in. My last statement, which is about the launch of the consultation into changing the way that the bus market works in West Yorkshire, which is going to be debated at the Combined Authority next week, probably answers the rest of that question, because essentially the bus franchising, and I must stress that no decision has been taken yet and will be taken by the Mayor yet next spring, but bus franchising would give the Combined Authority control over routes, frequency, fares and overall standards.
Okay, right, I'm going to bring that item to a conclusion, not because I don't think there's more legs in it to actually continue. It's just, it's shown the wide range of knowledge and experience around the table in terms of trying to move things forward. So can I thank the officers that have come forward with that? I've no doubt you'll be getting some sort of note from me with some suggestions in terms of moving things forward in that. But thank you for them going on. Okay, if I can now move on to our final item on the agenda today, which is item 10, which is the assurance framework. Craig, are you introducing this item?
I am doing, thank you, Chair.
Yep, you'd just like to go ahead.
Okay, if I just start off with giving a little bit of background, and then I'll go on to the sort of proposed amendments that we're making for the assurance framework. So, assurance framework is a requirement of government, as hopefully you will all know, due to devolve powers that we have got as a combined authority, and to devolve the funding and funding decisions to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And the assurance framework's got to comply with national guidance that the government set out, and that determines very much how the assurance framework works. Its purpose is to give assurance that decisions over funding of projects are proper, transparent, deliver value for money, but also, probably more importantly, deliver our outcomes and priorities as an organisation. All projects and programmes come through the assurance framework, and we have a lot that have come through. I think we're over 500 projects that have come through the assurance framework now. One of the requirements we also have is we've got to review it annually, and we do that every year, obviously every year. We did that in 2023, and I think corporate scrutiny were involved in that. I think it came to a corporate scrutiny meeting in January 2023, and it was published in February 2023. The next one up is February 24th. On the 28th of February, I have no idea where the 28th of February date came from, but that's when it's published every year. Last time it was approved in 2023, Combined Authority and Governance and Audit, who were part of that review, and also the LEP were part of that review, asked us to do a peer review of the whole assurance framework, and the purpose of this report is to update on that peer review that we were asked to do, and whatever comes out of that peer review will go into the February 2024 version of the assurance framework. So the report sets out the process that we went through, and I won't go through that in detail. Hopefully members of the committee have read how we've done that. The review has been slightly delayed in that we've had an organisational review, and there's been the implementation of a strategic portfolio office that I'm the head of service for now. So the consequences of that have had consequences on the assurance framework as well, so we've had to slightly review it in accordance with that as well. So the purpose of today is to give yourselves an opportunity to input into that review. So hopefully we can do that today. And then going forward, the 2024 version of the insurance framework, when it's amended, will go to the Combined Authority early in 2024 for their approval. That also goes to the Governance and Audit Committee, and I think the Corporate Scrutiny Committee again. We used to go to the LEP, but now because of the LEP changes that have happened, that's probably that won't be the case for 2024. So the main changes that we are proposing, and there are a lot of changes, and these are just the key changes that are listed in the report, but if I quickly go through each of them. There is the implementation of the Strategic Portfolio Office, so that strengthens our capabilities and controls about the projects that we do and the outputs and benefits that they deliver, so we can monitor and report on those. One thing that's been very successful for us, for people understanding the assurance framework, is training sessions on business cases, and we've done that, and we've also done question and answer sessions, FAQ, frequently asked questions sessions, and they've worked really well around all sorts of things: committee structures, evaluation, appraisal specification reports, business cases, etc., etc. And we're going to keep doing that and probably do some fact sheets, one-page guides for people as well, so they can understand it well. We've also, at the moment, discussing revising governance arrangements and delegations, and we're talking about, at the moment, investment board and an investment priority board at the moment, which will be officer-led to make recommendations to decision makers on the projects and programmes that we undertake as a combined authority. The more things that we really have that we can really do at the moment is a lot of the feedback that we had was about proportionality and simplification of the process. That's always been the case, and we've always been aware of that, and we try very hard to make things proportional. But we want to strengthen that proportionality even more based on a risk approach, i.e. how risky are those projects, and what that determines then how they come through the assurance framework. We have many flexibilities already in the assurance framework of how we bring things through, but other things that we're thinking of doing is we've got a business justification case at the moment. We're thinking of allowing that higher value projects to use that than is at the moment. We were talking about an additional simpler business case for projects under £500,000. That's not very many, but we do have those sort of projects. So that's a proposal. We are reviewing all of our templates to make them simplify them. That includes the guidance around them as well, around repetition of language and questions and so forth. We were very much transport orientated as a combined authority when we first started as a combined authority. That's changed very much since we became a mayoral combined authority. There's a lot more non-transport type projects that come through the assurance framework now. So we're already looking at making the business cases simpler for non-transport than they are for transport. Transport has some very complicated economic case requirements and modelling requirements and so forth that non-transport schemes don't have. So we're wanting to make that simpler for non-transport schemes. Part of that economic appraisal, there's something called an appraisal specification report that's required to outline how they're going to make that economic appraisal. Again, that's very different between non-transport and transport, so we're wanting to make changes to that. And another one is that to make the process even simpler we want to move more towards programme level business cases for the funding programmes that we do, and then from those programme business cases, projects, schemes will drop out from that, and they won't have to go through the whole process. They can drop straight into either a strategic outline case or an outline business case, or possibly a business justification case. We are continuing to work with our partners to make the process as simple as possible and as proportionate as possible, and we'll continue to do that even whilst we're discussing the 2024 changes. And then I think the last one that I'll just mention is that we have an IT system called the Portfolio Management System, which we fondly call PIMS, not the alcoholic drink. And we want to really make sure that people use that in a much better way. Because a lot of things are data-driven, the discussion we've just been having, there's a lot of data-driven stuff out there. We want to make sure that people use that properly, and we've got the most up-to-date information in that system, so we can report and monitor the projects and programmes to committees, but also internally as well. And I think that's probably everything from me.
When I was getting my briefing, I asked the question what elected member involvement there had been in the revision, and I was advised that there had been no workshop work done with elected members, but a survey had been sent to, well, let's take out the word here, but they were sent to Combined Authority Committee members. Now, I know I didn't get one, but that's because I'm new. Did any of the long-standing members get a copy of this? Because the reason being, there were only 3 returns.
It was 6 actually. I
Six,
misinformed
sorry,
it.
you misinformed me. Okay, so there were 6 returns in terms of elected member involvement. Now, so the question I was asking is what elected involvement there had been to move things forward. So does anybody recollect getting one of these questionnaires? No. Right, I think that's something we need to look about how we can get better elected member involvement in moving this forward. That's not to criticise what you've done, by the way. It was just I was asking the question, what, rather than it being officer-led or somebody else-led, what involvement and what responsibility the elected members on the Combined Authority were taking for effectively signing this off. So that's fine, that's that clarified. So anybody get any questions? I know Councillor Ray to open the batting.
Yeah, thank you. Most of what you've outlined seems eminently sensible. What kind of level of integration and conversations are happening with the insurances in the individual authorities? Because obviously as WICA, there'll be stuff across the piece, but actually that'll have impact on other projects in other parts of the combined authority. So I appreciate, obviously, transport's one thing. There's probably very high-level conversations with the relevant highways authorities, but bearing in mind, as you said, you're moving into different areas, what conversations have been had with the counterparts on a more local level around making sure their assurance models and frameworks are very similar to WICA's, bearing in mind some of those decisions will be crossing into their areas?
It's probably a piece of work that we do need to go further into, but I'm not aware of any assurance processes in local authorities that are similar to ours. I'm not aware of any assurance processes within local authorities, and I've worked for Kirklees and also worked for Leeds as well. There may be some assurance processes, but there's nothing based around the HM Treasury business case process for projects coming through. But it is some work that we need to do to work out exactly what assurance processes they do have.
To clarify?
Well, just to build on what Craig has said. So one of the reasons that we have this at combined authority level is because it's a condition of the funding that we get from central government. So the rules around funding of the combined authority and the various funding streams that we get, of which there's a patchwork, are different from the rules that govern funding within local authorities. So there are some differences. I think it's work, but as Craig was saying, we do work very closely with the local authorities, and all of the schemes that are approved through the Combined Authorities Assurance Framework, particularly to do with transport, are delivered in partnership with the local authorities, but they do have different assurance regimes.
Yes, which is completely understandable because of the complexity of the requirements from government. I suppose the question is the part of the combined authorities that we tie things up, and to make sure, bear in mind we're a heavily integrated region to a greater or lesser extent. And I think we've raised this previously about conversations around about actually, you know, how do we make sure, again, just going on the, like, say, transport, for example, that the way one council does one thing in their patch doesn't suddenly change what it is. I know there's, like, cross conversations, and I'm not saying it's not, but particularly bearing in mind the realms of housing, health, particularly if the combined authority goes down and enhanced partnership, it'll have an even bigger footprint in terms of its impact on local council areas. It would be, I would suggest, prudent that that thought and conversation start happening, because particularly if an enhanced deal is achieved for the authority, as Mayor Braben says, it's her ambition, the impact of the local authority on local decision making and some of those local partnerships down to the health level, for example, depending on the type of enhanced deal the authority gets, are going to be quite considerable. And the local authorities are already have their own assurance and decision making systems that go into that. So you'll have a whole series of different, your assurance model, your assurance system, the local authority system, and multiple different partnerships having to respond to the local authority's assurance system and to WICA's assurance system, and a huge amount of bureaucracy and complexity that spews out because of that, which will then slow down some of those key decisions that need to be made, because everybody's fighting over which bureaucracy they have to follow.
So I'll attempt to stick to stated combined authority policy and not make any political comments. So Greater Manchester and the West Midlands have done a deal with government for deeper devolution, which includes a single settlement. So the idea being that their funding streams are all wrapped up in one and the rules are different. We don't have that at the moment. So we have a range of different funding streams. £38 million a year gain share, which for 30 years, which is generally unring-fenced. We have the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, the Transforming Cities Fund, the UK Shared Prosperities Fund, etc. And they all have slightly different rules and different ring fences around them and different timescales that we need to spend them in and so on. And so simplification of the funding landscape and what the reporting requirements are is one of the ambitions that the Mayor and the Combined Authority have for any future deal, if there was one, with government.
Just supporting what Paul has said, I chair the Health Committee and I have to have partnerships across the trusts or trusts around. And when Scrutiny was set up, you know, there was a shock that went through the health trusts because our democracy has set out the path. And I worked in the health service for 20 years, and it was a shock to the systems of accountability. So, you know, I think the pictures got through to him after many, many years. But anyway, coming back on Chair, on the issues of the assurance framework and the projects, etc. General question, in terms of the schemes and projects, and bearing in mind some difficulties up and down the country that other authorities are having, is there any risk-adverse projects that you are aware of? And have you had to, in terms of the budget, I mean, you have to have a vision and a plan to apply. Have you had to prioritise within WICA to accommodate getting projects done?
Yes. So I haven't got it immediately to hand, but there was a report that came to the Combined Authority and first, I think, Transport Committee in recent months, which was about cost inflation and how we were managing cost inflation, particularly on the Transport Fund. So the West Yorkshire and York Transport Fund, which was agreed in something like 2014, there were a number of schemes in there where costs have gone up. And so decisions have had to be taken to about how to manage that inflation. So the short answer is yes, there needs to be some decisions taken around timescales, around value engineering, around pipelining particular schemes, i.e. delaying the delivery of them, and managing inflation and cost changes is and particularly over the last couple of years, while inflation has been higher, has been a constant issue for us. And it's also worth saying, as I'm sure colleagues are aware, that the real inflation on the types of projects that the Combined Authority is delivering is higher than the standard inflation rate because of cost of materials, cost of labour, supply chain, etc. So there are a number of challenges there that we're actively managing.
Just very quick question about this document itself. It hasn't really discussed too much about the planning, but I'm on the planning committee myself. So some of the controversial issues we're still dealing with, effectively the onshore wind, the ban, the leveling up deals and all that, and plus the water course. So there's so much going on there. And if we are going to develop the brownfield development as we have already, hit the brick wall almost, then how are we going to be able to put all that into this one document to make sure that we actually will be coming up with a more localized, suitable document for West Yorkshire, like your localization, how we are going to be dealing with a new national planning policy coming. Sorry.
You volunteered.
I would say it's not fully the responsibility of the assurance framework to deal with those issues. We very much want to know about those issues when business cases are put forward through to us about how they're dealing with those sort of issues. But I would say that's not the responsibility of the assurance framework to do that. That's a wider remit of the combined authority and the local councils that we work with.
Any other questions?
Just I suppose this is relatively topical for the last couple of years. Does the assurance framework take into consideration national government instability in terms of its changing its mind every 5 minutes, and therefore the associated risks? And particularly bearing in mind we are, again, in the environment we are in, there is instability in terms of what national government wants constantly. How is that risk assessed and put into the assurance process?
Okay, right. Let's go. Right. So
I mean, I know you're going to answer it, but again, this comes down to the fact if we had an elected member here, they could give you the response back again. Alan has to be very careful that his nuances cannot be misinterpreted by anyone, friend or foe.
So the approach that the mayor and the 5 leaders have, and the other members of the Combined Authority have taken, is to agree a set of strategic documents, starting with the West Yorkshire Plan, the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy, and so on, which set out what we want to try and achieve as a region. And then as the funding comes from a variety of different places, including central government, we can then fit that funding to what we want to do. So there is a process of partially the region kind of setting its own destiny and saying this is what we want to do, at the same time as needing to meet the requirements that are set by particular funding streams. So government might come along and say, we want you to spend money on social housing decarbonisation. Well, that might well be something that the mayor and the 5 leaders and the other members of the Combined Authority have decided is something that they want to do anyway, so it fits in nicely. Just occasionally, government of any particular stripe might decide that they want to give us money for something that we weren't otherwise going to do, in which case we may well deliver it. Yeah. So, okay.
No, the process that we usually go through is it comes through governance and audit, corporate scrutiny, and the Combined Authority before it's approved for the 2024 version.
So, thank you very much for your. Thank you very much for coming along here today and presenting it to us. So that just leaves one other item, the date and time of the next meeting, which is the 24th of November. So hopefully you've all found the agenda stimulating and giving you something to think about, whether in terms of WICA or even how we can work better together with our own respective authorities, because it's fine sitting here pointing the finger at WICA, but sometimes it's our own local authorities that need to reflect on the way that they are impacting and delivering, to give you some of the statistics that you need for a start. Because in Leeds, for example, we've got a massive database that holds information on just about anything and everything going. So we populate that. You can probably use that as part of your research as well. So we've got to get our data right in terms of giving you the information so that you can respond to the needs of our people. So thank you all very much for coming along. Thank you. Thank you.